it's so nice to see so many people coming in and so many actions coming in. A lot of times I wake up in the morning pretty early and the news is shocking every morning. It's just like, are we tired of winning? I don't think so. It just keeps coming and coming. So there's a lot of very exciting stuff going on. And I'm just so grateful for the cooperation that we have among the people here, working together as a team, supporting each other. This is not an organization that falls to backbiting or to ripping each other apart, as we've seen in a lot of other organizations. And I don't know what the magic formula is, but we seem to have broken that, so or built it. So it's really wonderful to see the fruits of our labor coming to fruition. And one of the things that you may have noticed today coming up are this executive order of the president, and we'll be talking about that extensively in this meeting with Patrick Colbeck has joined us, and we also have a major lawsuit that we're working on, and this is called With All in Democracy, and Heather Honey has joined us to talk about that. So this is going to be an action-packed time here with covering a lot of information. So I won't take a lot of time yammering on here. Why don't I'd like to first of all introduce Jacky Eubanks, who is our Director of Field Operations, and she's out there bringing in organizing our task forces into chapters. So Jacky, you want to tell us the news?
Sure. So I know Wayne County has gotten to a point where it looks like we have a full executive board. People have stepped up to take on those positions. So that's wonderful news, especially because it is the largest county in the state. And we're working very hard to make sure that Kent, Ingham, Barry, which is a new one, St. Clair, Macomb are able to charter. So I've been having, meetings with Shelley Lake, for example, to make sure she's set up. And I've been planning with Sherry Ritchie, who's our events coordinator. I've been trying to put together a list of meeting in a box. So we'll be reaching out to you likely this afternoon after this meeting to have suggestions come back on what of a list of 10 or 12 meeting ideas you chapter leaders are most interested in hosting at your county. So that way we can create those presentations and then present it to you. So you don't even have to think about it. It's plug and play. I know that Patrice had mentioned my giving a presentation. I had given a presentation at the Citizens for Traditional Values event in Macomb County on Saturday. Do you want me to pull that up and we'll just go through it really quickly?
Yes, please.
Okay, so just give me one moment here. I'm going to try to pull up that PowerPoint. It shouldn't take more than a few minutes. So some of these slides I'm going to skip through because you're on our call, so you already know who Michigan Fair Elections is. Let's see. Will it let me? Yes. Okay, so I do want to say that the point of this presentation was to educate folks on the different negative legislation that has passed in our state regarding elections since 2018. So in 2018, we had 2 constitutional amendments that passed. Prop 2 instituted the Independent Redistricting Commission, which many of us are familiar with. The idea was we don't need to have our state representatives gerrymandering the districts anymore. We can have a nonpartisan or bipartisan group of unelected people doing this, and it'll be more free and more fair. But of course, by having an unelected group, it takes away the power of the people to choose who's actually overseeing the redistricting process. And then Prop 3 in 2018 implemented a whole bunch of bad things. Automatic voter registration, same day voter registration. So with same day voter registration, you can, on election day, go register to vote and cast a ballot, and there's no time for the clerk's office to validate that your information is correct upon registering. You just get to cast a vote anyway. No voter ID is required. It used to be that you had to present a photo ID in order to vote. Now you can sign an affidavit in lieu of that. Straight ticket voting was added to the ballot, so now people can just check yes on Democrat or check yes on Republican, and it takes away the incentive to actually look at the down ballot races. And of course, then Zuckerbucks. The door was opened for Zuckerbucks because private funding of elections is now allowed. In 2020, the pandemic was used as a pretext to violate the law. Jocelyn Benson, as we probably all remember, sent unsolicited absent voter ballot applications to every registered voter on the rolls, which was a violation of the law. You have to request one. She can't just send them to you without you asking. She suspended the absentee ballot signature verification requirements, which I actually had experience with as a clerk's office election worker in 2020. The signatures would come in, they would look not like what was on file for that voter, and we were told to accept it anyway. Poll challengers were told to stand 6 feet away from election workers, which hindered their ability to actually oversee elections, and this was challenged in court. We do know for a fact that Jocelyn Benson put back onto the rolls 600,000 registrants who had been removed over the course of 25 to 30 years prior to that, which led to a 108% voter registration rate in our state, meaning that not only did we have every single person in the state who was 18 and older registered to vote, but we also had an excess of that. So more voters on the rolls than people of voting age in the state. We also, she refused to remove the deceased voters from the rolls, and that court case is still on the books. It's still being disputed. And I know that MFE filed a lawsuit about this because this was a HAVA violation, but Benson allowed or used state universities as agents of get out the vote efforts. And I believe the law is that if you are receiving federal dollars, you cannot be an agent of registering to vote. Is that correct, Patrice?
I'm not sure about that, but you can't show partisanship for sure.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then ballots were accepted. I know, Patrice, you already covered this a little bit earlier, but ballots were accepted and counted after 8 p.m. on election day, which included the student ballots that were counted as having been cast at 2 in the morning after the election had ended.
They actually registered voters at 2 in the morning and took their ballots.
Right. Clear violation of the law. Election must stop at 8 p.m. on election night. In 2022, Proposal 2 amended the Michigan Constitution. It gave the right to vote without harassing conduct, which basically put shackles on our poll challengers. It took away even more of their ability to challenge ballots that they think had something to do with violating election law. UOCAVA ballots must be counted if postmarked by election day, which means that if the ballot is dropped in the mail on election day, it could take up to 6 days for it to actually get to the local clerk's office, and it can still be counted towards that election. So it extended the election day ballot counting period by up to a week after, basically. And of course, the legislators adopted language allowing ballots in which no postmarks are even visible of it having been mailed. Voters have the right to identify themselves with a signed statement in lieu of photo ID. So major changes even from 2020, whereas we used to have photo ID requested. Now we've moved on to it's not required, and we're moving into a more loose and more dangerous territory of voter ID. Okay, voters using only a single absentee ballot application can now receive absentee ballots mailed to them over and over throughout the course of the year. They no longer have to submit an absentee ballot application for every election in which they want their ballot mailed to them. They only have to sign up once, and automatically the ballot will keep getting mailed to them for every election. It required state-funded ballot drop boxes, which the fact that this is now a requirement means that we have our work cut out for us monitoring those drop boxes. As we know, they are not secure. There are not cameras located on them. Everybody has seen 2,000 Mules, I'm sure. Only election officials can conduct post-election audits, which seems like a fox in the henhouse scenario. The very people that we may suspect had something to do with a lack of integrity in the elections are the only people who can check for the integrity of the election results. And it requires a minimum of 9 days of early voting, but allows up to 21. So this is where we got that early voting put into the Constitution. And of course, it reinforces a constitutional amendment, the private donations to fund elections, so Zuckerbucks can continue. Board of Canvassers are required to certify election results based only on the official record of votes cast. So they can't actually say, you know, I don't believe the results, I'd like to do a hand recount. Nope, if the books say this, you have to certify. And in 2023, there were new laws passed at the state legislature level that impact our elections. For example, people can now register online for a mail ballot, which how can you possibly verify a physical signature if it's an online application? It did create a permanent mail voting list. So now we have a permanent list of people who are automatically going to receive ballots for every election. Same-day voter registration no longer requires a valid ID. So not only can you register to vote on the day of the election and cast a ballot, you do not have to present a photo ID in order to register to vote on the day of the election to cast a ballot. So making it even more difficult to trace the validity of the registrant's identity. This impacted my sister. My sister was 17 at the time of the 2024 election, and she did in fact receive a voter registration card in the mail from our local clerk's office. That is because the Secretary of State automatically puts you on a pre-registration list if you get your driver's license at the age of 16 or 17, but it just happened that kids under the age of 18 got voter registration cards in time for the 2024 election. This also expanded the acceptable voter IDs to now include student IDs and non-photo IDs like utility bills, which of course, this is what the U of M student who is a Chinese national was able to use his U of M student ID to cast a ballot in our election. It also repealed a prohibition on people hiring transportation to take voters to the polls. And in 2025, these are laws that are going to go into effect this year. So I know, Patrice, you had mentioned this earlier today. The SOS will be required to automatically register each person who applies for, renews, or updates their address on a driver's or chauffeur's license, receives Medicaid, or interacts with any government agency. So we already have an issue with duplicate registrations on the Michigan voter rolls, which means we have registrations with different voter ID numbers for the same person. It's the same name, same birth date, same address, but two different voter ID numbers. And now, because of this, we suspect that it may lead to an increase in duplicate voters because registrations are coming in from multiple government agencies for the same person. So this is kind of the kicker here. Only if a person provides proof that they are not a US citizen, or if they mail in a request to the Secretary of State to be unregistered, will they not be automatically registered to vote? And what's really eerie is that the language of the bill says those who do get registered and vote but are not citizens are not considered to have knowingly intended to register to vote and will be presumed to have a defense for a violation under Section 932 AC. So basically, they can vote, and the presumption will be that they did not actively register, and so they didn't violate the law. Nothing in this section shall require documentary proof of U.S. citizenship for voter registration. So we're opening the floodgates for non-citizens voting in our elections. And the Secretary of State gets to designate any state agency as an automatic voter registration agency. That agency can't be removed as an automatic voter registration agency unless the organization does not collect enough information to be able to register a person to vote. So basically, any government agency, if they're collecting your name, birth date, address, and last four digits of your social security number or driver's license, will be registering you to vote, whether you like it or not. Now, I I immediately thought when I saw this, the state will be required to notify individuals that their information was used to register them to vote. What that's telling me is that, let's say you are a non-citizen and you got registered to vote by one of these state agencies. You didn't do it, it just happened. And now you've been told you've been registered to vote without your knowledge or consent. Now that you're aware that you have been registered to vote, you have the knowledge that you can vote. And there may be the thought in someone's head, well, if they registered me, I might as well, whether they're a citizen or not. Next up, we have ranked choice voting. This is kind of the big talking point that we've been studying for the last couple of weeks. For those of you who don't understand how it works, voters numerically rank the multiple candidates running for a single office from 1 to however many candidates there are running for that office. So that's like an infinite number, really. And if no candidate receives more than 50% of first choice votes, then the candidates with the fewest first place votes get eliminated, and you go through multiple rounds until one candidate has the most, meaning over 50% first choice votes. But there's a complicated process to that, because ballots where the eliminated candidate was marked first place, those ballots get adjusted. So either the next choice candidate who is ranked as second on that ballot, that second choice then gets moved to first choice, or if the voter only voted for one candidate and didn't fill out the rest of the ballot, their ballot gets trashed, and essentially their vote's not counted at all. So this is repeated until one candidate has greater than 50% of the remaining first place votes. And of course, we're relying on the voting machines to do very precise calculations of this. And this is a very complicated mathematic process. And you can see in this photo, this is a real ballot, by the way. The city of Portland had a city council race, and that's how many candidates running for that office. So how are voters possibly supposed to know how to rank all of these people in order? It's just ridiculous. It forces voters to vote for candidates they don't support or may not know anything about. Political parties can pick the winner of their opponent party's primary. Multiple rounds of ballot counting will disenfranchise voters by eliminating their ballots throughout the many rounds. It can significantly delay final election results because you have to go through so many rounds. Look at this. This is a New York City Council race. 10 rounds of voting in order to find out who the winner was. How long is it going to take to continually count the ballots until you get a winner? 10 rounds. How long is that going to take? It's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to audit the results of the election because of the complicated nature of the process. And it destroys the concept of majority rule or popular vote, because the candidate who gets the majority of first place rankings may not reach that greater than 50% threshold, and then can be overtaken by somebody with less first choice votes. So basically, like Alaska is a prime example. In this is a real congressional race. Alaska went blue, and the reason why is ranked choice voting. You had different candidates. The most conservative got the most first choice votes, but did not reach the 50% threshold. So then everybody who voted for the Democrat who got the least number of first choice votes in the second round, their second choice was kind of the Rhino candidate. And so the Rhino candidate ended up overtaking. But that's the Senator Lisa Murkowski race in Alaska that I'm referring to specifically. But that's kind of how the process works, is Democrats can get their candidate in even if they're not the majority of voters in the state because of it. And then this just goes through our list of things that we do as an organization, but I'll stop there because I just wanted to cover the legislation that we need to be aware of that's gone into effect and that will go into effect.
Thank you very much, Jacky. A really fine presentation. Thank you. And thank you to the legislative committee that's been tracking what's happening in Lansing and working with the legislators there so that we have this data. I would also like to say that on March 20th, Michigan Fair Elections is sponsoring a petition to the United States Supreme Court that was filed on March 20th. And then now we're seeking what are called amici briefs to support that petition. So if you know organizations that might like to write something up in support, it's really important because the Supreme Court takes about 100 or 200 of the 7,000 or 8,000 applications that they get for writs of certiorari. So we need to have the Supreme Court know that this is an important case and people see it as an important case whose time has come. So thank you, Jacky, for doing that. And Jeff, I'd like to have, if it's all right with you, I'm going to skip you for right now because I don't want to run short. We got Heather Honey here too. Heather, could you tell us what's going on with the All in Democracy case and well, in All in Democracy in general? Thanks.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is so exciting about this new Trump administration is that all of these schemes that we have been uncovering, the collective we, over the course of the last 4 years, I see this, at least these next 2 years, as an opportunity to try to unravel them. And one of those is essentially the weaponization of the U.S. Department of Education. Just as a little bit of background on this one, as many of you probably know, in 2008, when Obama won the election, one of the biggest demographics and the thing that people, suggested kind of put him over the top was the, I'm getting feedback somehow.
Yeah, and your image is fuzzy. Oh, you just did something. It got better. I don't know what.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so during the first administration, during the first election, 2008, won overwhelmingly college students. But then in 2010, his popularity, the enthusiasm, all of that stuff really dropped off. And his campaign for reelection was concerned about, how are they going to get that student vote back up again so that he could win? And so this was a campaign priority. So in comes this task force in the Department of Education that's supposed to study, student engagement. And ultimately in 2011, this task force published this sort of manifesto called the Crucible Moment. And the Crucible Moment said, and I'm going to quote from it here, "With this report, we call on the higher education community, and all of its stakeholders to embrace civic learning and democratic engagement as an undisputed educational priority." So democratic engagement synonymous with voter turnout, right? So in this crucible moment, they outlined plans for how universities should kind of divert time and resources away from like regular studies into promoting this progressive ideology. All of this endorsed by the Department of Education. They described how it should be a priority of higher education to create political activists. So really kind of distorting this concept of civic education into political indoctrination. Along those same times, so after that, the universities, of course, heeded this call to action, this national call to action, and really started pivoting towards trying to increase student voter participation on college campuses. In 2015, an organization was created by former Obama administration campaign folks, administration people, including Valerie Jarrett, created Civic Nation. And Civic Nation launched a program about all-in campuses, right? So it's the All-In Campus Democracy Challenge, which you've probably heard people talk about over the course of the last several years. So this All-In Campus Democracy Challenge, sponsored by the Obama administration to drive up turnout for Democrats, was actually recognized as early as 2016 as highly partisan. So in 2016, the president of an organization called the National Association of Independent Colleges and Universities refused to endorse the Civic Nation All-In project because he said, and again, I'll quote, "It was hard to know where one ended and the other began. The issue of the White House and Civic Nation, either separately or together, moving in this direction struck me as an entangling perception at best that I did not want." So here in 2016 already, while Obama was wrapping up his second term, these university organizations recognized that All In was working so closely with the Obama administration to do all of these things. So fast forward to 2017, Obama's out of office. He creates this organization called Organizing for Action, which was publicly, disclosed as a Trump resistance organization. So Obama said, I'm out of office, but I'm not going away. It was this organization that he put together, millions and millions of dollars. And then he partnered with Eric Holder's organization, which was the National Democratic Redistricting Committee. And their whole mission was to try to redistrict so that they could turn these purple states blue. In other words, get enough districts, gerrymandered so that Democrats would easily win them. So in order to accomplish these goals, working together with Civic Nation, Civic Nation heeded the Department of Education's call to action and crucible moment, and so did other organizations like Tufts University. So Tufts University, in fact, if you go on their website, it says that the whole reason that they launched this program that they have in their Institute for Democracy and Higher Education, which, by the way, is funded by Pierre Omidyar, for those of you who know who that is, it was to heed that call and to essentially be a mechanism, they claim, to study the voting rates of students, right? Now, one of the things that is consistent across all of these major Democrat schemes is that voter data is very, very valuable. Karl Rove said, and this is a quote from Karl Rove, it says, "An arms race is underway that will deeply affect America's future. It is not about next generation nuclear weapons or hypersonic missiles. Instead, it is a struggle between Republicans and Democrats over who has the best political data. In this emerging digital age, elections hang in the balance." So that's Karl Rove, well respected as a knowledgeable guy in terms of that. Obama's campaign manager said that the perfect list of voters is the aspiration of all political campaigns, that we must ensure that our lists of voters are as close to perfect as possible. This is the only way that we can win. So there's no doubt Democrats, Republicans all agree that having accurate voter data is incredibly important. Now, some of this data is available to buy, right? You can buy, who subscribes to what on Netflix, and if you can get the voter rolls for sure, but those people who aren't on the voter rolls are a little bit harder to find, a little bit harder to profile. So in order to get that kind of data, this Tufts University program devised a scheme to get all of these universities, over 1,200 universities, to authorize the disclosure of all of their FERPA protected student data. So in order to do this, they created this requirement to be part of the All In Campus Democracy Challenge. If you want to be a university that is all in, that's committed to these ideals of democratic engagement and all of that sort of stuff, you have to participate in something called the NSOLVE, which is the National Study of Learning, Voting, and Engagement. And there's an authorization form on there, which essentially says that the university is authorizing the National Student Clearinghouse to disclose the institution's enrollment data as reported to the clearinghouse to a third-party data aggregator. Now, of course, as I mentioned, this voter data is highly valuable. They disclose it then to, in order to determine who's registered and who's not, and who voted and who did not. They initially started off disclosing it to the Democrats, the DNC's voter data aggregator, which is Catalyst. They subsequently have added L2. So Catalyst gets this data, L2 gets this data, and they are merged. Now, why is this a big deal? Well, it's a big deal because they claim a FERPA exception that cannot apply. So FERPA is the federal law that protects student data from disclosure. It's a, you're not supposed to share stuff. If you had a college student and you ever tried to get information about them as their parent, the university will tell you, sorry, I can't give that to you. And that's largely because of FERPA. But the folks at All In Civic Nation have long claimed that they are doing this under this studies exception to FERPA. However, the study exception to FERPA says that it can only count as a study if the data collected is used to administer a student aid program, which of course it's not, develop or administer predictive tests, which it's not, or improve instruction. So they claim that they're using this to improve instruction. However, they do not collect any information about instruction. So there's no way to measure whether the instruction is effective or not. So therefore, we think that this is a violation of FERPA, and we have tried a bunch of different avenues to try to stop this particular disclosure. But more broadly, these Civic Nation all-in action plans also give these progressive organizations the kind of access that CTCL and the Zuckerberg funds gave these progressive actors in the 2020 election. So here we're bringing them into the university. And when you examine some of these all-in action plans, which you can find on the internet for different universities all across Michigan, when you look at those action plans, they actually identify their partners. And it is, I assure you, never any conservative organizations. They are all far left organizations. So, all in all, how is this a weaponization? Well, first of all, what happened during the Biden administration is they doubled down on this. And so there were two things that were issued by the Biden administration that really, really ramped this up significantly to the point that where we're seeing it right now. The first thing that they did is right after Biden's Executive Order 14019, which instructed all basically Biden bucks, right? That's how that was termed. The Department of Education distributed a toolkit to every single university and instructed them that best practices would be to join this all-in campus democracy challenge and to participate in the NSOLV and sign over the data. So here you have the Department of Education, the Federal Department of Education, instructing all universities to participate in a program that organizations within in that field have said it's far too partisan to participate in it. They also then went so far right before the 2024 election to issue a memo that said that federal work study funds could be used to pay students to do voter registration and get out the vote. Of course, that was an extraordinary weaponization because work study funds are not supposed to be used for anything that is not in the broader public interest. So this, what we have right now is this kind of access. So if you think about in Wisconsin, there's a Supreme Court race that is, the election is next week. That's a really big deal in Wisconsin. But in 2023, they had one where the race was decided by these campus voters. Essentially, if you look at the turnout on campus, you could see how that really swayed the race in that direction. But here's the thing: these far left organizations were given unbelievable access to influence the vote. And there was a story out that I like to quote because it's so crazy to think that an organization would be able to do this. But an organization that was like a pro-life, obviously for the Democrat Supreme Court justice, was able to get into all of the buildings on the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus, and on every desk in every classroom put material about how, if they didn't vote, they were going to lose their rights and all of this sort of thing. And Wisconsin, of course, had same-day voter registration. So this was, again, just driving up the vote. These all-in action plans also advocate for and instruct these universities on how to get voting locations on campus, right? So that was probably something that didn't happen before this program took effect. but that's a high priority in all of these plans. So that's the scheme that's going on. It has a significant impact. There's all kinds of measures of this out there, studies that show how the vote is really swayed by this high turnout university student voting. So that's kind of where we are. But I started out by saying we're really in a place now where I hope that we can seize the opportunity. So we have been working with a bunch of folks trying to encourage the Department of Education to rescind all of this guidance, to rescind the crucible moment, even though it's 10 years old, to rescind the toolkit from the Biden administration, to rescind that letter regarding the federal work study funds, to basically pull back all of these things that came out of the U.S. Department of Education that really kind of turned this around. And also, we're trying to get the Department of Justice to look at whether or not this disclosure does in fact violate federal law. So, we're hoping that we're going to be able to fix this at the top. But right now, what we need to do is make more and more folks aware of this, and again, try to counter it to the extent possible while we go about the process of hopefully having the Trump administration unravel this weaponization.
Thank you so much, Heather. I forgot, I didn't do you justice when I introduced you. Heather heads up the Pennsylvania Fair Elections Organization, but she's by trade an investigator, and one of the best investigators you'll ever come across. So it's been my pleasure to work with Heather. The only thing I would add to your wonderful presentation is that when the Department of Education subcontracted this study, they subcontracted it to an international firm. And then the report that they produced, the Education Department put a disclaimer on there saying this was done by subcontracting and we do not endorse it. So then a third party organization, and I apologize, I can't remember the name of the organization, republished it as the Crucible Moment. And it was used then to completely transform our higher educational system. And it's polluted down to the high school levels as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So instead of teaching the foundations of our republic, they're teaching activism without any ideological base or any philosophical fundamentals beneath it, other than, they tell them every year what the 4 points to focus on are. And it might be reproductive health, it might be voter suppression, it might be racism. They pick those 4 and then they hammer those, and it's not based at all on the functioning of our republic the way it should be. So I'm thrilled that you're going to be pursuing possibly litigation, and the Trump administration is on this, and it's a new world we're in right now. So thank you, Heather. Thank you. All right. And next up is Patrick Colbeck. Let me give the floor first to Jeff for a few minutes. Jeff, you want to take it away?
Yes, I do. And as you can see, we are very active and involved with, election integrity. And so what we would like to do at this moment is just give a short plug. A lot of things that we've done, the souls, the roles, we've recruited workers, we filed this litigation. One of them now is at the Supreme Court, as well as HAVA complaints. And we've done other reports. We've done outreach to low propensity voters in 2024. We wrote letters. We did personal contacts. We were involved with an Arab American registration education effort. We're deeply involved with all the legislations that Jacky mentioned earlier, and wrote comments on what the implications were. So that's 2024 in a nutshell. Okay. One thing we want to say, and Pat will bring this up very, very quickly, the election integrity landscape changed on March 25th with Trump's executive order. And now we have, if you will, solid ground. So what are we planning for 2025? We operated 2024 on a shoestring, and we really, really, really want to augment our efforts and do things with funding in 2025 that will implement election integrity and make our election secure again. And again, we have backing with Trump's executive order. We want to engage on that success. I'm not going to go through all of these. We want to get the souls to the rolls really geared up. Now that clean voting rolls are mandated, through the federal law, through HAVA, enforced, we have that. We want to also, and I guess really critical, keep analyzing, supporting, and reporting on legislation, both at the national and the state level, and litigation. We have an ongoing case with the Supreme Court, and there's a hill to die on. The progressives are determined to try to put ranked choice voting on the ballot in 2026. And we're going to litigate that. And we're going to litigate it hard. But to litigate, you're going to need funds. All right? And so with what we did on a shoestring budget in 2024, we want to be able to, we're shooting for $1 million. And believe it or not, in election integrity NGOs, that is a pittance. We're largely volunteer run. We put in our time, our sweat, and our effort, and we could use some help. So if you have the ability, we would love for you to be a supporter through monthly donations or one-time gifts. Any support will be useful and grateful, because remember this: our whole Constitution rebels at the thought of giving government the power to control our minds. And with what we've done a little with a lot. We're serious people doing serious work on serious issues, and your financial support and your time by volunteering would be greatly appreciated. And so thank you again for making 2024 a success, and we want to make 2025 even greater. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. We appreciate it. Okay, next up is Patrick Colbeck. Anybody that doesn't know Patrick Colbeck, now's your chance, and you'd be a minority in this group, because he's been with us for a long time. He's a good friend and a real patriot, and he does remarkable work. So I'm really thrilled to have Patrick join us today to talk about the presidential executive order that all of us have been hearing about, and maybe some other things too. So go ahead, Patrick.
All right. Well, first, a quick segue. You mentioned that you're monitoring the status of legislation throughout the state. I'm working on some AI-based tools for Mike Lindell right now that allow for automated updates being emailed out to people. So I'll let you know when it's ready to send out, so we can send you a copy of that as well if you're interested. Also,
yes.
So this executive order, it was a landscape change, and I think Jeff did it justice there. This executive order that President Trump issued on Tuesday has been described as the farthest reaching executive action in the history of the republic to secure our elections. And Trump, you could tell, was particularly giddy about signing this one. He says it's going to be the first of many such actions. So we're buckled up and ready. But my main reason, I was talking to Patrice about this, my main reason of getting on and talking about this executive order was to highlight that if you look carefully at this executive order, Michigan fair election footprints or fingerprints were in this executive order. So in sections 3 and sections 4, Mark Vaith, I don't know how you pronounce your last name, Mark, I'm sorry, but that audit that you did, which I think is probably one of the most professional election integrity documents that I have seen come out of any organization nationwide. I know for a fact that information was provided to federal authorities and likely had an influence in the issuance of this executive order. So I want to give you guys a little bit of wind in your sails, because you deserve it. That was very well done. And this is just a start, but there's 2 provisions. One that talks or orders the Attorney General to ensure enforcement with HAVA and the NVRA. And then also there's another section in there that says upon completion of their audits, so i.e. the supplement that you provided to the EAC, they're supposed to be submitting their findings to the Department of Justice for appropriate legal action, which includes clawback, by the way, of funds from states that are not in compliance. So kudos to each and every one of you. Now, there's a lot of other provisions in here, and to the untrained eye, it unless you've been zeroing in on elections for quite some time, you may gloss over some of the provisions. But I'll tell you, there's provisions in here to address smurfing, the Act Blue smurfs, and the money laundering activities that were going on through Act Blue. And that deals with the foreign funds and the examination of that. We also have evidence that they're getting serious about enforcing restrictions upon electronic voting systems that feature components from China. So it's referencing various sections of U.S. code that deal specifically with critical infrastructure components. And this is one of those things that Obama trapped himself in, getting greedy to go off and steal the 2020 election right before he left office in January of 2017. He designated our election systems as critical infrastructure. And subsequent to that, there are two National Defense Authorization Acts passed in FY19 and FY23 that specifically prohibited the import of any critical infrastructure components that feature or critical infrastructure systems that feature components from China, for example. And guess what voting systems have 20% of their components made in China? So you don't see this in black and white, explicit, saying we're banning voting systems. But when you read between the lines and you start talking about the enforcement of critical infrastructure related laws, that's where this is headed, just so you know. And ultimately, this leads to hand counts of paper ballots, which I think is where a lot of us would be much more secure in the conduct of our elections. But it was done very subtly, which I think is very wise with what they're talking about. And it's really one other key thing that I want to highlight regarding this executive order is the fact that a lot of people are saying, well, it doesn't do any good unless we actually pass some laws associated with it to actually put it into effect. I'm hearing that all over social media. People that are saying that have not read the executive order. The executive order is clearly an example of President Trump coloring within the lines of his authority as the executive branch, not the legislative branch, as the executive branch. And what he is citing is calls to enforce existing laws. He's citing over a dozen statutes in this executive order, and really what he's trying to do is doing exactly what an executive should. He's helping to prioritize the troops on where they need to focus, and he's encouraging enforcement of the law. And one thing in particular that I think we'll find exciting here in Michigan is that he's encouraging collaboration with the secretaries of state to go off and help clean up the voter rolls. But he also highlights that if you are one of those states that doesn't want to collaborate, and I don't know of any state that might be interested in doing that, including one shaped like a mitten, for example, he puts that to the top of the priority list for investigations by the Department of Justice. So, yes, he's very serious about executing and prosecuting these people for what they have done. And if you need any more evidence of that, all you have to do is look at the photo that he put up on the entrance of the Oval Office. That's his, anyway, it's his mugshot. So he's serious about holding these people accountable. I can tell you with some of the people that I've been working with very close to him up in the White House. So guys, I want to first of all give you guys kudos. It's the first of many steps that have happened, and it does reflect a product of your work. I do recommend making sure and reiterating, now that we have new sheriffs in town, also forwarding copies of that audit report up to the folks in DOJ. I know for a fact that they have electronic copies of it because I helped to provide some of those copies, so they know of it. But I'm in that mode where we need to be in shotgun mode. And we all need to give a word of thanks to Mike Lindell, because it was him that opened the doors to get this into the right hands, into the right people. So anyway, with that being said, there's so many other areas I could go into. I mean, I just got my FOIA response from the Secretary of State. They rejected my request for the qualified voter file transaction log, and they didn't even put any thought into the rejection. They just said, we reaffirm what we said before. So Now we're looking at subpoenas, and I'm hoping that our legislators out in Michigan House here can execute a subpoena for that qualified voter file. And Patrice, you may remember we initially went down this road for the QVF with the equal access lawsuit strategy, and it occurred to me that in the wake of that, because I was looking at the lawsuit to get access to this info, that we had never actually issued a FOIA request for the QVF transaction law. So I reconciled that about a month ago or whatever, and tried to get that moving. And we're going to get that data. And for those of you online that don't know what the QVF transaction log is, I think the simple way of presenting it is the Rosetta Stone for election fraud in the state of Michigan, because it tells the who, the what, and the when of all modifications to the qualified voter file. So all the headaches that are causing Tim to pull out his hair as a database analyst in that QVF, dealing with both voter rolls and voter history. This QVF transaction log should tell us who's making those changes and what changes they're making. And it'll provide that explanation to what Jacky was talking about. By the way, Jacky, great presentation. But when she was talking about 600,000 illegal voters being put into the system, my notes indicate it was 800,000, but I'm not going to quibble about it. Either way, it's a bad thing. This qualified voter file transaction log would give us insights into who actually seeded that the bad data in there, and also it'll tell us who else has access to our qualified voter file, including Rock the Vote and all the, which ties into the university discussion that we were having with Heather. Great presentation. So this merges everything if we can get this QVF transaction log.
Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, I think it's important to note too that those applications that were mailed out, whether 600,000 or 800,000, they were returned to sender if undeliverable. So they went back to the Secretary of State's office, and she sat on those 600 or 800,000 that were undeliverable.
I have
way
that
into
was one of
January.
my FOIA requests. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead and finish. But I do have a FOIA request related to where all those got returned to, the actual PO box.
Yes, and then what happened to that information before the election? Did somebody maybe vote for these people? I mean, it would have been a great slush fund of people that were
Oh,
not.
yeah. No, what it did is it came back and told them who all the low propensity voters were in the election. And so
Exactly.
all they had to have is a little flag in there. So all their friends out in the early voting sites that have access to a ballot printer and the QVF can just go to town and crank out voters.
Yeah, now we're not saying that happened, but it certainly opened the door to that type of abuse because it was never disclosed until January, and then they sent the individual groups to the clerks, which they should have. So we still don't know the names of those people that were undeliverable. So thank you very much.
So let's roll the tape and get that QVF transaction log, shall we?
Absolutely, thank you. Great work, Patrick. All right. So Tim put in the chat here. Where did he go? I just lost my chat there somehow. How did I do that? Apologies. Anyway, Tim, you just put in the chat how many what were your numbers?
6,126 duplicate votes. So that just reinforces what Patrick just said. They've got their side hustle of access to all these different voters that they can bring into the QVF. And guess what? People who are low propensity voted in person, but they got a matching absentee in their name as well.
That's right. So, okay, well, moving on, we have here, we're going, oh my gosh, we are really short on time. Isaac, I might skip over you today and go right to Kristine. And Kristine, I'll have to cut you real short, and then I'd like to give the All-Star Award. We have a great All-Star I'm really excited to announce today. Go ahead, Kristine.
Well, I just want to mention that we've gotten some great media coverage in the last week or so. We've had a story in both the Gateway Pundit and the Epoch Times about our legislators here in Michigan who are who are trying to say that they need to have purview over time and manner of elections and not these amendments that Jacky was talking about. So we got some good coverage there. Tim got some coverage in the Gateway Pundit. And then we also got some nice coverage from the Midwesterner, who was there live streaming our Sunlight Award, which we gave to Livingston County Clerk Elizabeth Hundley. And so she is one of 18 county clerks who we are giving award to because they did respond to our FOIA requests, and they did so promptly and without charging us. So we are recognizing those clerks, because the clerks who responded within 5 business days to Tim's request for information, his efforts to audit the 2024 general election. So that's all I have today.
Thank you, Kristine. Great job. The whole communications team is doing a great job. And if you'd like to help out, put your name in the chat and Kristine will grab it and put you send you an invitation to the next committee meeting Tuesdays at 5. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, now I'm so excited to announce today's recipient of the All-Star Award. This person has been with us from the beginning. She's actually a member of our board of directors. She volunteers her time endlessly to the point where, you know, we all worry about her because she's working so hard. She has led many efforts in training. She sends out notices to her team, and those notices we then take and use out and send out in our general communications as well. This is Dee Davy, whom we know and love. We cherish Dee Davy. She's known for her hats and patriotic attire. So Dee, thank you very much for all you've done and for all you continue to do. And look at all the applause you're getting. Everybody knows Dee. So thank you so much for your spirit and your honesty and your wisdom and your skills. There's nobody that can beat Dee when it comes to managing a project. So Dee, if you're here, pop on the screen and say something.
Patrice, thank you so much. All of the people within MFEI and PIME are my new family. I feel so connected to all of you, and I feel so dedicated to moving forward the goals of election integrity. And thank you so much for the recognition. Very much appreciated. Love you all.
Thank you, Dee. And thank you, everybody. Again, I want to reiterate how just breathtaking it is how this team stays together. And we've been through a lot of high pressure incidents together. And, you know, we treat each other, I think, like I told Tim, I think I was giving him a tough time the other day. And I said, you know, it's because I think of you more like a brother that I can speak this directly with you. So, as Ronald Reagan said, you know, if you agree with somebody 80% of the time, that 20% where you disagree, that does not make you enemies. So we're family here, we're working together, and my goodness, it's a new day. Things are really happening. We're seeing the fruits of our labor. And I was thrilled to hear Patrick. I didn't know the background on how our work was taken into the White House and how it became part of the executive order, but wow, can you believe it? Great work, everybody. So if you have suggestions, please nominate people for the All-Star Award. I nominated Dee, but also there were others who nominated Dee. And keep the nominees coming. And if you have subjects you'd like us to address or speakers you'd recommend, please help. So thank you very much. We want to hear from everybody. Thanks a lot and see you next Thursday, news at noon. Bye.